Welcome to In Search of the Truth. I'm Alec van Rensburg, right, episode 2 in my series on the Smit murders of 1977. In the previous episode, I spoke about the background, who Dr. Robert Smit was, why he possibly had been murdered, the fact that he could have discovered something about the government, about certain individuals in government, and the fraud and corruption that had been committed. He and his wife were both murdered in 1977, and the letters RAUTEM had been painted on the kitchen wall and on the fridge in the kitchen with red spray paint. So in this episode, I'm still with Lisa Smit, their daughter. We investigated the murders for the past 31 years, and we're going to share some of the information of some of the people we spoke to, some of the people who could have been involved or could have been on the sideline of these murders, and what they told us. Lisa had just started 2 years before I met you in 1992. You were only 28 years old. There were a lot of rumors at the time already about the Bureau of State Security. The Bureau of State Security was actually launched in 1969 already, and they approached Hendrick van Bergh. They called him Lang Hendrick because he was a very tall man, very staunch, very strict, very feared, much feared by many. And he was the head of what we call BOSS in the media, and people refer to BOSS, but it's actually the BFSS, the Bureau for State Security. And there were a lot of rumors that BOSS could have been responsible for these murders. And you decided then in 1992 that you're going to talk to Hendrick van Bergh, the head of BOSS, and ask him.
The reason I went to go and see him was because of a journalist that was doing articles at that time, again, about the murders, Mark Stansfield. Mark made me a list of things he wanted me to ask him. Questions in his handwriting that I had with me. And I just arrived there. I didn't phone or anything at that time. We found out where he lived, and I just pitched up at his house.
It was a farm outside Pretoria. Yeah.
And his wife opened the door, and she wasn't very friendly because why do I just rock up here and ask to speak to him? And I said, but I was in the area. I mean, obviously but that's what I said. And she said she'll see where he is. And it wasn't long he came. I can remember him coming down the hall, and he had a cloth type of hat, like a farmer would wear, and he had shorts on, and you could see he was busy outside. And he was very astounded to hear who I was and why I was there. And we went into his it's probably his, I don't know what his little office he had. I think he was caught off guard with me, and he said to me, but he can't talk to me like this. I must make a proper appointment with him because he's not right now able to talk to me. So I actually left there very deflated, but we did I told him, what I did tell him is that somebody actually suggested to me to go and speak to him. And that person was an elderly gentleman that phoned me that I had on a recording. But I didn't say that to him in the first meeting. I just said somebody referred me to you, said I must go speak to you. And we made the second appointment, and the second appointment was absolutely the opposite of the first one. When I got there, he was so, what's the word?
Unfriendly, aggressive,
antagonistic. He was, he was very abrupt with me. Walk in, sit down. The first thing he says is, he just said it in Afrikaans. How do I do it in English, Alet?
What did he say?
Hoekom is jy by my?
Why did you come and see me? Yes.
Yeah. Why did you come and see me? Who sent you to me? But he was very angry. He had a very angry posture. And that rattled me because the first time I met him, it was nothing like what he was now. He was extremely rude. And I said to him, somebody phoned me because now I'm shocked. I didn't know how to handle the situation. I said to him, somebody phoned me, and he took this piece of paper out of his pocket and he said, who wrote this? And that was the list that Mark Stansfield gave me. And I looked at that list and I thought, how did he get that? Because there's
Where
no
was
way.
it? In your
There's-
handbag or
yeah.
what?
And it wasn't as if my handbag would have been open there. But I must say, I did go to the toilet once. That's the only explanation I can give why he had that, because it was that piece of paper that Mark said to me, you must ask him these questions, and I never took it out in the first meeting. I actually forgot about that going into the second meeting, and when he took that out, it scared me, because then I realized, oh, no, and I said to him, those questions were written by Mark Stansfield, and I was to ask you this, because then I decided to be honest with him, because the person I was speaking to was very icy. I was scared of him. I was scared at that moment. And then he said to me, but then I want to see you with him. He was, but okay, the end of it, I did ask him if he had anything to do with my parents' murders, or if he knows anything, which he denied, vehemently denied. He actually said that him and my father were very good friends. They were house friends. I'm sorry, I don't believe that, because I've never seen that man in my life before. I think I would have known.
So did you and Mark go back?
Yeah. Me and Mark went back, and that's actually when we spoke, where I could ask the questions. And
apparently your first question to him, judging by Mark's newspaper report, was you asked him, did you have anything to do with the murder of my father and the murder of my mother? What was his response? Wasn't that when he said, I swear, or...
yeah, he swore on his
Grandchild.
youngest grandchild's life that he had nothing to do with it. He actually offered them his help, or his department's assistance. They didn't need it.
But you played him the tape recording as well,
Yes.
of the man. It was an anonymous call, wasn't it? And it was
Yeah.
an older Afrikaans
Yes.
speaking man. Or who
Yeah,
was
that
it?
also upset him.
What did the man say?
That's the man that said to me, you must go speak to Hendrick van der Bergh. He was known as the long generaal.
The tall general.
Yeah, the tall general. But at that time, I was recording all the calls that were coming in, because people were starting to phone. And he wouldn't say who he was. He wouldn't give me the name. He said, that's not important. I'm just showing you in the right direction. He knows who committed the murders. It was under his watch. And I played that to Van der Bergh, and that upset him actually quite a lot. He never indicated if he knew this person or recognized the voice or anything. He was more pretended to be dumbstruck that somebody would say to me, to Lisa, to the daughter of the people that were murdered, to go to him, because he had nothing to do with it.
You see, but this is not what I find strange. Then he told you that he knew your father well, and that your father, when he came back from overseas, if he had information, he would come to him and share it with him. He said he was almost like working for him. And you've always said you didn't believe that.
No.
But now my question there is, if that was true, what he said, why didn't your father then tell him what he had discovered? And he clearly didn't, because
No, he didn't.
Van den Bergh knew nothing about it. So
And
the whole
actually,
thing
everybody
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and everybody said actually was Van der Bergh was actually pulling John Foster's strings, So Van der Bergh had to know. He had to know what the reason was. I'm telling you, not because my father would have told him. I think he knew who, or he orchestrated, or he was, I don't know. He had a big part not in committing the murder, but having it done. That's how I feel.
You know what I also find interesting is you asked him about the political motive, and he actually sidestepped, according to the newspaper report that Mark Stansfield wrote, he sidestepped your question by explaining, like when he had to start the BFSS boss, how he went to the father of the CIA, Alan Dulles, and how he asked him for advice on how to go about it, and that Dulles spoke to him, and Dulles said to him, military intelligence is going to be your problem, military intelligence in South Africa. And then Van den Bergh turned to you and he said, Lisa, that's also going to be your problem as military intelligence. That's strange. Did he elaborate? Did he say anything?
No.
You see, what I find strange is from time to time, we pick up something about military intelligence or military, and there's so many threads that I've picked up. But I
People that we
can't
spoke to that weren't there, that ended up there.
at military intelligence.
Yeah.
And I cannot just, at this stage, I still cannot pull all these threads together. It's weird, but it's something that's there in my subconscious all the time, that there's something we need to discover about military. They didn't necessarily commit the murders, but there's some form of a connection. And I still, unfortunately, cannot tell you what it was. And then he said there were also rumors and a lot of newspaper reports claiming that these were foreigners, foreign assassins. And he said something about the mafia.
Yeah, he said he put his
feelers out
yeah, to find out overseas and at the mafia, and they said, no, look for the murderers in your country. At that time, that made sense to me. But as time has gone by and where I am now, I'm starting to believe that the assassins were flown in.
From somewhere.
Yeah.
You see, and I just feel there's a difference between a mafia assassin or a criminal assassin and somebody who's a professional assassin who's probably got military or police or something specialist unit background, because those guys will never talk because it's their profession. They kill for money. And I'm not sure if the mafia would have known about that. And he also said that 2 years after the murders, he had the opportunity to look at the murders, the docket.
He asked, yeah.
And what did he say about the docket?
No, he said there were things missing in that docket. And he said he could have helped them solve this murder, but he was never asked.
And
he
that's
said
strange
that.
Also.
I don't believe that for 1 minute. Seeing the position he had. He must have known.
But there was someone who also told us at one stage that Van Bergh was not involved in the murders, but he was involved in the cover-up. Those were the allegations by one of the task force members that we spoke to.
I think the people that did the sweeping and stuff, maybe he was the one that organized that. If the assassins were flown in, I don't know, from the mafia or from where. I'm just starting to question everything now, which I didn't question at the time when it happened.
It's interesting that he also said, from the newspaper article I saw, that he said he's convinced the assassins were white. Yes. They were very professional. They were professionals, and that the murders were very well planned. And I think we all know that because there's no evidence. There's no hard evidence that the police ever found.
And you can't commit a murder and there's nothing.
He said he believed that your mother knew the people who came to the door that night. Did he elaborate?
No, he didn't, and he believes she knew them. My train of thought after that was who I could place there, who I thought might have been the person, was Nico Diedrichs for some other reason. That's the name I had. But I'm telling you now I don't believe that anymore.
No.
Everything he said, you actually have to go and question, because this is boss we're talking about.
They were feared, eh?
Yeah, and this is Hendrick van der Bergh. He's the main guy. And if he doesn't want you to know something, you're not going to know it.
Yes.
And he's going to send you in 1,000 different directions. Actually,
to confuse you.
He's telling me the truth, but he's not telling me anything.
Yes.
So, no.
And he definitely, before you left, apparently told you also he's got no clue what the motive was. So then in 1994, you and I met. I got your number and I phoned you. And we started working a little bit together, but we also still did our separate things. I just want to mention here so that people can understand the circumstances under which we worked, is that there were two guys I interviewed at some stage. You never met them. One actually later wanted to meet you. And they were also both foreigners. They were British, but they were in South Africa, and they were part of the security forces, had been here for many years, moved in the intelligence and security force world. And very dangerous world, because both of them died under very strange circumstances, where the one they said it was an accident, the other one they said it was a suicide. And when I spoke to investigating officers, they didn't believe that. Especially with a suicide, they said he was shot and it was the wrong hand. Say he was right-handed, it was the left or something. And they said, we're never going to solve this case. We're going to put it down as suicide, because we know, we can see these are professional state or former state, apartheid state. And that was the world we moved in, we started moving in, and the world where these people, if you become a threat to your own people that you work with, these intelligence people and military and police and these security forces people, nobody would even think twice about taking you out and ending your life. That's the world. And you and I were swimming in the waters around this world and on the periphery. And I don't think we realized it at the time. So what we first did, we saw so many people. In 1995, you asked me also, it was the time when the Truth Commission was going to start, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was now the New South Africa. Apartheid had come to an end. And they started a commission they called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where victims of human rights abuses, people who've been either hurt or injured or lost family members or there's been a murder, could come and tell their stories and ask the state to investigate and to find the perpetrators, especially where nobody knew, like your case. And you said to me, you wanted to go to the Truth Commission, and would I help you? And I agreed. It was also for people who were perpetrators, and it's not only from the apartheid state, but also from the what do you call them, the ANC, the PAC, all these people who were fighting for freedom. From their organizations as well, they could also apply for amnesty. But there was, the rules were quite strict. It had to be politically motivated, and they had to be able to prove it. And they must have had been ordered to do what they did. They must have remorse. And I can't remember now what was the fourth one, but there was a fourth. And so that it was very strict. It was just not getting amnesty. And a lot of people applied, and you and I started in 97 specifically was our busiest year, where we realized that we've now got to get it together because the deadline was approaching. So the first person who contacted us was a journalist from Rapport, the Afrikaans Sunday newspaper. And she gave you a copy of a newspaper report that had been written by another journalist, J.J. van Wyk, and it was never published. And in this, he mentioned that a former task force member had made allegations, and that he mentioned specifically 3 names who were also former task force members, Dries Verwy, Jack Widdowson, and Roy Allen, and that these guys had been involved in the murders. Those were the allegations. And then they said their source was Francois Willem Oosthuizen, and he was also known as Oosie. Everybody called him Oosie. He was also a former task force member, and he was then at the time serving a prison sentence for being an accomplice in a murder. He was working for a security company, and a security guard was killed, and he got a 10-year prison sentence. But he alleged that he saw your father's briefcase in Dries Verwy's safe in his office. Now, Dries Verwy was the commander of the task force, and Widdowson and Allen, Roy Allen, they were members of the task force. And he claimed that he stole this briefcase and that he had taken the contents and he'd put it in a Swiss bank, what do you call it?
A vault
deposit box, a deposit box or something.
Security box, yeah.
And he claimed that in the briefcase he found your father's checkbook, he found his credit cards and a report that was addressed to the Prime Minister, John Foster. But you and I quickly knew he was lying about that.
Because he was talking about an Absa checkbook.
And your father was with FNB
and
Nedbank. There were Nedbank statements as well. And he also got the name wrong. He said R. Smit, and it would have been RVS.
Yeah.
His second name was Van Skalkwyk.
Yeah.
Smit. So the names were wrong. And also, if you look at the inventory, we had none of these items were on the inventory of what could have been in that briefcase. So he was lying. We knew. And he said he would give these documents to us if the police would shorten his sentence and if he could have his job back in the police. So he was actually trying to negotiate a nice deal for himself. But I still think it's possible that he had seen that briefcase, because we'll get to it. Another witness also claimed to have seen the briefcase. Could have been in Verwys, but he didn't steal it. And he didn't see the contents. So you and I decided this is what they said. And the other thing they alleged was the meaning of the letters RAUTEM, R-A-U-T-E-M. They said it referred to an island in the Vaal River. We even had photographs at the time of this. This island belonged to RAU, R-A-U. It's the Randse Afrikaanse Universiteit, the Rand Afrikaanse University. It was their name. And that the rest, the T-E-M, stood for Technisch en Moord, which means technical and murder, and that island belonged to the university. They used half of it, and it's true. I've confirmed that with so many sources, and I've got colleagues who've been there because they used to take people there for lectures and things. And the other half was like bush, and it was used by boss for their planning and their secret meetings, and apparently also to listen in to people's conversations. That's where their base was. That was the allegation at the time. We couldn't confirm it, and funny enough, at the time, I was very skeptical about this. And then we started looking for these people that he mentioned, and one of my sources told me that Roy Allen was working for the security company, was in charge of security at the Johannesburg International Airport, who's now OR Tambo. But first, you and I went to see Osie ourselves. And it was in May 1997, and we got into my car and we drove to this prison in the Eastern Free State. Goedemoed prison in the Eastern Free State. And as I say, we spoke to him, and that's what he told us, and he lied. We knew that he lied. Like I say, it's possible. The briefcase could have been there, but he didn't steal it and he didn't see the contents. Definitely not.
No, it wouldn't end up with a task force member. It would have ended up with...
No, but remember who Dries Verwey was. When we talk about that, you'll know it could have ended up with Dries Verwey. It could have. Because Dries Verwey was former boss man. He was task force. He had the ear of... He was very close to Hendrick van den Bergh. And he was a man who was in the security police before. He was... apparently a man who was very efficient at his job. Okay, so it could have been. On our way back, we went to your uncle's farm, which wasn't far from there, Klokkelaan, the farm where you then grew up after the murders. And your uncle said a few interesting things. He first of all confirmed that your father told him that he'd uncovered something that he was going to disclose. They also told him that he feared for his life. And the other thing your uncle told me was that your father told him it was an international scandal that went further than South Africa. The other thing that I think is very important that he told us, that's almost the crux of this thing, is that he said he spoke to a Brigadier J.B. Visser. And Visser came to your uncle as your father's brother and said to him, what would you do if you were me, that by solving this case, you would have to disclose state secrets? That is the crux of the matter. And your uncle said he asked him that. That was the question. Important. So now we finished talking to Osie. We spoke to the Attorney General's office who worked with the TRC. And they also said...
It's important to say that we spoke to the Attorney General's office because they told us about the 4 suspects.
Yes, they did, but we'll get to the 4 suspects just now.
Okay.
All 4, because they're 4 and how they fit in and
Yes.
how they became suspects. But the first 3 was because of Osie and Joop, okay? Now, we're going to get to Joop now, but Osie allegedly also claimed that on the night of the murders, he saw Jack Widdowson and Roy driving in Springs and that they fired shots at him or something. But the Attorney General's office said to us they didn't believe it because as far as they knew, Osie was then based in Namibia. It couldn't have happened. So then we heard about Joop Smit. Joop Smit was Dries Verwey's driver.
Yeah.
And he made contact. He made contact with you. He spoke to you on the phone a few times. He spoke to me on the phone, sometimes phoning at midnight. He implicated Widdowson and Roy Allen again as well. He didn't want to talk on the phone. Said he was too scared. And then you met him at the airport. And he said to you, it takes a special kind of person to stab somebody who'd been shot. He also told you the same things again. He said he was working he was a quartermaster at the police headquarters in Durban. And that a former task force member arrived there and started talking about the Smit murders, and that made him scared. You got the impression that he was scared.
Yes, definitely. He was nervous.
But what was also strange is that he was pointing fingers at Roy Allen and Widdowson,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, changed his story, and he said, no, Roy Allen was definitely not involved anymore. And then we discovered through another journalist that he had flown to Joburg and he had had a meeting with Roy Allen.
Yes, that's right.
And then he changed his story all of a sudden. And Europe, we must remember, had double Springbok national colours in some form, 2 different forms of martial arts. He was a martial arts expert. He was also a very fit guy. When the task force was formed in 1976, he was the PT instructor, the physical training instructor for the first intake of the task force as well, while being Verwey's driver. So he was very fit and very competent, actually, of looking after himself. But in any case, he pointed fingers at the same people. Then through all of this and talking to all these people, all of a sudden we discovered that murder cases are now going to expire, but it was because I've actually gone to check on it again. There was a loophole in the Act, because the Act originally said if a crime had been committed and in cases where the death penalty did not apply, so in other words, not murder, not rape, those cases, after 20 years, they would close the case permanently, so the accusations expire, the case expires. But not with the death penalty ones, the ones where the death penalty applies. But now it's the new South Africa, apartheid's come to an end, and they'd actually done away with the death penalty. There is no more death penalty. So now all crimes can expire after 20 years because there's no death penalty. And we asked a lot of questions. You went to see a minister.
Yeah, I was very upset about that.
Articles, but the process was already on the go. There were other people, legal people, and they did amend the Act in time to make sure that these, what they called the death penalty crimes, even though there's no death penalty, would never expire and would be open always. So that's where we were at the time, but that was stressful, having had to deal with that as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, for me it was, because if that went through, that meant that nobody would ever look at the case again.
Yes, and then it's closed
because
forever.
Because it's 20 years, it was right before the 20-year
anniversary. Yes, it was actually,
right before it.
It was 1997. It was, yes, you're absolutely right. It was about to expire. So we also heard about a Z Squad. I can't remember who told us about the Z Squad.
Wasn't it Osie or?
I don't know.
Europe.
But we heard about the Z Squad, and we were told that the Z Squad was part of BOSS, the BFS's Bureau of State Security.
It was the elites.
And that it was the hit squad. And that they were used to take out enemies of the state, to kill them. And there's no hard proof. And what we must remember, what's interesting with the task force, the task force was formed in 1976 after the siege of the Israeli embassy in Johannesburg, where they realized the police can't deal with these type of situations as a terror attack. And then they decided they needed a unit who could deal with it. And then the task force, the special task force of the police was formed to deal with terror situations. These guys were trained, they got sort of parachute training, they got almost military training along with their police training. And the first intake of the task force were guys like Roy Allen, Widows, and Verwey was their first commander. But all of them were formerly in BOSS, interestingly enough, were former BOSS members. And I remember people were saying to me, the Z Squad was like Vlakplaas, who was a part of the police, their hit squad, that came out during the trial of former Vlakplaas commander Eugene de Kock. Gordon Winter was a former journalist, but he was actually also a spy, an agent of BOSS, but he worked as a journalist undercover. He wrote a book called Inside BOSS that was banned in South Africa, and a lot of people later discredited him and said what he wrote is not true. I personally think half of it's true, half of it's nonsense, because I think he was being fed this information.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
to spread it. And one of the things he wrote about was the Z Squad, and he said it was also known as the Death Squad or the SS, interesting enough, okay? So a lot of people saying it did not exist, it's nonsense and whatever, but I've spoken to too many senior operators. When you talk to the operators, they tell you, definitely I know guys who were members of the Z Squad.
But in our investigations, it became very obvious that the Z Squad.
Was a Z Squad.
There was a Z Squad.
Martin Dolenchek was a guy who was implicated in another murder in Durban, and he claimed he was a member of the Z Squad. So there were people, according to the Truth Commission. And we were told that Dries Verwy, who was the commander of the task force, formerly boss, who was very close to Van den Bergh, that he was also the head of the Z Squad. And that they operated from a farm, the Daisy Farm, outside Pretoria. So we'd heard about Roy Allen now in 1995, first time. We spoke to Osie in May of 97. We spoke to Europe. All these people pointed fingers at Roy Allen. And the newspapers at the time were saying the RAUTEM, that the RA actually was for Roy Allen, which I still don't believe, because how do you explain the rest of the letters? But in any case, at that stage, they hadn't mentioned Roy Allen's name. They just referred to a man known as R.A., okay? You and I decided, you pushing me, that we are going to visit Roy Allen. And he worked for a security company at the Johannesburg International Airport. So on one winter's morning, very early, we drove. I met you at the airport. You came from Pretoria, I came from Joburg. And I remember we were very nervous. I was worried that he's going to tell us to go away because he didn't want to talk to us, and I really wanted to talk to him. And we decided, I said to you, I'll introduce myself, and you were worried if you introduced yourself that he would chase us away.
Yeah.
So we decided we're not going to lie. I don't lie. So we're not going to lie. If he asks, we'll tell him, but I'm just not going to introduce you. Because my reasoning was, the way I know a lot of these guys who are highly trained, they would never discuss a murder, especially one in which they'd been implicated, with people unless they know who they're talking to. They won't. They would turn to you and say, and who are you? Or they would say, sorry, I didn't catch your name, but they would not talk to you unless they knew. So we got there and Roy went as white as a ghost. He was extremely nervous.
He was shocked.
And nervous.
And very nervous.
But it wasn't a nervous of feelings of guilt at all. It was more like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
What's happening now?
I'm caught out type of thing.
And we walked into his office, and I remember we sat down. I sat this side, you sat that side, and he was in front of me. He didn't look at you once, not once. He looked at me. I got uncomfortable the way he looked at me, because he just looked at me like this. And we spoke English at first.
No, it was as if I wasn't in the room.
Yes, he acted as though you weren't there. So I asked him a lot of questions. I asked him whether he'd been involved. He denied it. And I'll have to look here at my notes to make sure I don't miss anything, because it was important. He invited us into his office. He ignored you. He denied any involvement. He admitted that he was a former boss member. He also admitted...
What he also told us is that his wife had worked for my father.
Yes, that came. He did, yes.
Which we didn't know.
Ida.
Yeah.
Ida, they called her.
She worked at Santam, no?
Santam International.
Yeah. For a short time, she came from government to the private sector, and she worked for my father for about 6 months, 3 to 6 months.
It was maybe 6, 7 months, I can't remember.
And then she went back to
the government.
Yeah, which was strange. Why would
Santam International wasn't private sector.
I know, but I mean, that we didn't establish really at that time. When Roy said that his wife had worked for my father, I think that's where me and you
started getting suspicious.
Yeah, then we started asking questions.
Before he even said that, he said, okay, he confirmed boss, then task force, and later, it was after the murders, he went to military intelligence, to DCI, the Directorate of COVID.
They all ended up there.
COVID collection. He was upset that we were there, and he said he could lose his job because of his allegations. He's very aware of it. People have been telling him that Osie was in prison as saying it, and he's also aware that Smit, who was Verwy's driver, was making these allegations. And he told us that Smit was their PT instructor. He told us that at the task force. He also said that he heard that Europe had given a statement to the Truth Commission and he couldn't understand why they weren't making these allegations. He also said that he was investigated a few years ago, it was in the 80s, because of his wife. Yes, Ida. She worked for your father for a few years. He said in 1976.
Not for a few years, for a few months.
For a few months, I mean,
Yeah.
before the murders. I asked him at one stage whether he knew General Andre Bergh, who was a police general's brother. I said the brother came up not as a perpetrator, but as somebody who could know and who could maybe help us. And he said, yes, it's Henny Bergh. They call him Hans. And he promised that he would ask Henny whether I could phone him and get his telephone number and whether he would speak to me. And he also told us that Henny Bergh was the helmet robber of the 80s. It was a man who wore a motorbike helmet and robbed banks, and that he went to prison, but that he's out now. Then I asked him about the Z Squad.
I'll never forget that. Can you remember how he flew up from his chair?
Yes.
He went and stood upright and he said, can I offer you anything to drink?
He first walked to the door, stood there, didn't know what to do with himself, came
Yeah.
back and said, do you want coffee? And
That
then he
was
went,
like
he
a trigger
called
word.
someone to give us coffee. And he came back. And he sat down and he said to me, the Z Squad's one thing that's never been exposed. Those were his words. He didn't deny the Z Squad. He said, never been exposed. And he said, I'm not going to be the first one to talk about the Z Squad. And I thought that was interesting, because if he thought there was no Z Squad, he would have said it. He actually admitted that there was, and he was not going to
by
talk
saying,
about
I'm
it.
not going to be the first one.
No.
In other words, there are others.
And then he kept coming back to the Z Squad during the conversation, kept telling me, and that he wasn't a member of the Z Squad and so forth. And before we left, he turned to me and he said, you must go to a video store, videos in those days, still in the 90s, and that there was a Greek movie called Z, the letter Z, Z as they say in America, on the Greek military, and that if we want to know about the Z Squad specifically, we must watch this movie.
Did we ever do that?
No, but I found it on Google, and it's quite involved. Yes, it's also about a unit. I'll have to read it again, about a unit that did all these things. And he also said if we wanted to know about the Smit murders, and we must speak to a guy called Gerard van Rensburg, Tony Oosthuizen. And he said Gerard van Rensburg was originally with National Intelligence, moved to military intelligence, etc., etc. JJ de Swart, he said, was second in command of the task force, and we should speak to him. When I told him that the police said that the person who did the stabbings was left-handed, he said, but I'm left-handed. Remember that? And we knew it already, but pretended we didn't. Okay. We asked him why he thought the Smits could have been murdered, and interestingly enough, he didn't refer to the info scandal like many others. He said sanction busting. He said because of sanction busting, he believed ministers and politicians had been involved, and without being provoked, he immediately said, but not Bakbota.
Yeah. That was actually very
interesting.
Yeah, the way he did that, he actually put all the focus and attention on Bergh.
And he spoke English initially, and then he switched to Afrikaans, and I could hear he spoke very good Afrikaans. It was like somebody who's Afrikaans speaking, but he had an English accent. And I was thinking of McDougall, who phoned.
With the English accent.
And I was wondering whether he could have maybe made the call and made the appointment. Any case, because Widowson didn't speak Afrikaans at all. Not at all. Any case, so the next day he told me, he said Henny would speak to me, gave me his number. Then he phoned me again, and he was furious. He said to me, why did you bring the Smit daughter to me? And I said, but I thought you knew because you didn't ask who she was, and she'd been in the newspapers every day, her photograph. Everybody knows what she looks like, I assumed, and I did.
He'll be posted.
We thought he knew. And I said, why didn't you ask? Because I thought, and he said he was never going to talk to me again, and he never did. But he spoke to you, funny enough, the Smit daughter, okay? So he phoned you, and he did the same thing to you, but he said he would meet with you, and he did, and he spoke about his wife who worked for your father apparently from April 1976 till September 76, and it was like more than a year before the murders. She, according to what we heard, he told us she was a Springbok. She had national colours in pistol shooting. So she was a very good shot. And he also, we heard from the Attorney General's office, I think, that she had top security clearance as well. Okay. He also told us that, because he said he never discussed things with her because she couldn't talk to him because she had top security clearance. I don't know. Any case. And you asked if you could phone his wife, Ida, and he said he would try and arrange it and get a number and blah, blah, blah. He'll try.
But we mustn't mention
But
him.
we must never talk about him or the Smit murders. You may only ask her about her job
At Santam.
Santam International.
He would have provided that number for me the next day.
But what was strange is that he brought up all the things you at that stage, which we'll talk about at the end, is about all these dangerous things that happened in the threats, and somebody had cut the cord of your electric blanket and it exploded and stuff. And he knew about it, and it hadn't been in the newspapers, and he referred to that. So how did he know? We didn't know how he knew. Who had told him? About a heater, that was never in the newspaper.
No.
That was turned off and all of a sudden was on. He was in Australia when all of this happened because he moved back and forth, and then in 2001 he finally moved to Australia for quite a long period because his grandfather was Australian who came to South Africa. And funny enough, he asked you another question. He asked you, why did they sweep your office where you worked, the estate? You worked at an estate agency.
Yeah.
Why did they sweep your office there for
home.
bugs but not your home? And then we did have it done through new people, ANC
Yes.
people who were now part of the intelligence world, and they found bugging
Yeah.
equipment.
But that was a valid question because...
But how did he know? How did they know they'd swept?
Exactly. That wasn't in the newspapers.
He wasn't part of the system anymore.
That was at the time that I already had that guard.
Protection from
Yeah.
the Truth Commission.
Yeah,
Yes,
they-
you did.
I already had the protection. So that was strange. Why they wouldn't have swept the house.
Yeah. And then he never came back to you with an answer about Ida. So of course you got impatient.
So I found it
So
that
you
following
phoned her
afternoon.
directly. And she wasn't very friendly.
Not at all.
She got a bit better, you said, after you told her that you don't think Alan was involved, Roy Allen.
Yeah.
They apparently married in 81 and they got divorced, I think, in 92. And then when you told Roy that you'd already spoken to Ida without him phoning her first.
He said, oh, shit. That was his words.
And he wanted to know from you what she said, and you said she wasn't very helpful. But before you even did that, you and I went to her house one day. We sat there for hours, but there was no one home. We couldn't, and you. So
Me and Hendrick also went, eh?
yeah, and Hendrick was a lawyer, an advocate that you used to hand in
Yeah.
your submission.
He and I also went to her house.
Yeah. So I don't know. We were wondering though, because there was a lot of talk that Roy Allen could have been the sweeper, the person who goes in after an operation like that to make sure there's no evidence left behind, no fingerprints and stuff. Those were the allegations people made, but we both sort of felt that we didn't believe he was the murderer. No, we didn't. And the other thing that came out a lot of times was that it was his trademark almost, that whenever he had to do an operation for BOSS or for Task Force or for wherever, he would use red spray paint and do the hammer and sickle.
Yeah.
He told it himself at the scene. And he said he was warned by Phil Freeman, the one who was the bodyguard on the ship, that he must be careful because he's left-handed, he does it the wrong way around, like a mirror image of the right way.
Yeah.
And that people could actually trace it back to him. And he had another habit of smoking cigarettes, and then when he'd lit the match, he would wait till it's 3/4, turn it around so that the whole match is burnt. And Phil Freeman, who was a former soldier, told him, don't do that. You're leaving traces that people can lead to you. But in any case, and then he spoke to you. Oh, you never. He one time then. We'll get to that when because you spoke to him, he took you back to Roy. But Roy didn't really talk to us again. But there was a lot known about Roy because afterwards, because the finger in the newspapers, his name was mentioned now often in connection with the Smit murders and the murder of the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme. So he started talking a lot. He sent emails to people. I've seen it. I've seen all the stuff that he'd written. And he pointed fingers at Dries Verwy and Phil Freeman. He claimed that even though he couldn't prove it, he thought that they were the people who had the skills and the personality to have committed these murders. He said Dries Verwy was very efficient when it came to taking out the enemy. And with Phil Freeman, he also said, if they had told Freeman that your father was a communist or had ties to Russia, he wouldn't have even thought about it twice. He would have done it because he hated communism so much. So he pointed fingers at them, and I found that very strange. But there were also witnesses. This Henny Bergh, we'll talk about him. He's claimed that he witnessed on the day of the murders, he saw Roy Allen, Widowson, Verwy, and Jerry Raven, another task force member, leading in 2 cars from the task force officers.
That's one thing Roy Allen told me, that he knows that they can place him, we can place him in Springs that
on the night of the murders.
Because he was there for another operation. What's SNT in English?
Yeah, it's for
the money that they would take
for your expenses.
Yeah, for your expenses. And he was there on the 22nd of November 1977.
He was, yes.
He admitted that to me.
Yes, and there was a trace. The police told us about that they could place him in Springs, but not in the murder house. And he admitted it to you. And a lot of the former operators I spoke to said to me, it's highly unlikely if they had such an op that you would almost call a black op, it's off the books, because this was not the whole organization. This was like an op that was top secret. They would never have had another big op in a small town.
Mm-mm. Well, Roy never told us what that op was.
Yeah, he didn't.
He didn't say.
And he'd signed out, he also admitted to you that he had signed out
a car.
With the stabbings, with the person being left-handed, the Attorney General's office showed us knives, but we'll get to the knives as well, where the knives possibly could have come from. We know that Roy was left-handed. I am not convinced that Roy could have done that. I don't know. But the red spray paint, they also checked that and made him spray RAUTEM on a wall with red. But I've read a lot about it. It's different with when you do graffiti, with handwriting.
You can change your handwriting.
It's not the same. And also the police told me later years that handwriting experts said to them it was too long after the murders. People's handwriting changes. So it's not, you can't really link it that many years later. There was a lot. Oh, he spoke a lot. He also admitted that he was not scared of doing what he called extrajudicial operations, so play outside the law if he had to do a job. And he said it was the same applied to Freeman and the same applied to Verwy. But he gave a detailed account in an email to someone of how he thought if Freeman and Verwy had been involved, of how they would have done it. Detailed. Cars, stolen number plates, changed number plates, where they would have gone, what they would have, how they would have got rid of the detailed. And I found it strange because if these people were close to them, and he always said they were close, why would he point fingers at them? And I asked some of the operators, and they said to me, because they were dead. In 1997, they were both dead. Roy also claimed he believed that Verwy had the ability to do it because he'd seen he wrote, he said, I'd been witness to the cold menace of Verwy's anger. And he'd seen all his goods and his devices and his things. And Freeman was a perfectionist and a specialist. And he also had the ability, especially if they told him it was communist, And Roy believed that he gave that, like I say, that scenario, and I just want to see exactly what we haven't said yet. He believed that it was only a two-man job, those murders. But a lot of other people I spoke to, and with hit squads, they said it's usually a 46-man team because of all the facets you've got to cover and to make sure there's no evidence. So they say with hit squads, usually it's 46 men, not two.
I would say there were two that did the killings. Most
Yeah, but I
definitely.
mean, they supported.
Yeah.
But it's not just two people involved.
No,
there are others involved
they
as
came
well.
afterwards. Yeah,
And Roy told me also, or told us, that he didn't believe they were foreigners, and he said because foreign assassins have got no loyalty, they would have come back, asked for more money, in the end they would have spoken. That's rubbish. It depends who you're dealing with, because there are professional assassins, we know that, who do it for a living, and they would never burn their bridges because they want more jobs, and they well paid. Assassins all over the world who do killings. Okay. Roy Allen implicated Phil Freeman and said he would have driven up from Cape Town, all of that. But what I don't understand is he said he was very close to Freeman. But at that stage, Freeman and his wife had already moved to France.
Yeah, he wasn't in the country. Yeah.
Remember we were told.
Yeah.
And that is when I went to Cape Town, but I went to see Freeman's wife as well. Roy said it was never discussed. The whole murder thing was never discussed amongst these people because you just didn't do it. Unless the operator who committed the crime or the operator who did this operation brought it up, you don't ask them or discuss it. It's like protocol. So Roy, though, there were a lot of things that I thought made me think he was there. We know he admitted it. He was left-handed. We know that the red paint thing was his signature at crime scenes. He'd also later years wrote about that he didn't only do the ham and sickle, there were scenes where he wrote pigs. And there were a lot of people who said that the words RAUTEM had been seen all over the country, in the Cape, in Namibia, in Angola, where crimes had been committed. And there was a specific incident. Roy always said what he did was spray paint and burn buildings. There was a specific case in the Cape where a building had been built. I don't know, it must have been an enemy of the state. And the words RAUTEM had been spray painted.
And that was before the murders.
Long before the murders. And that building, unfortunately, had been demolished already. But that the words RAUTEM had been spray painted there. Fire, RAUTEM, red paint. Doesn't it make you think of Roy? To me, it seems that it points in his direction. But there's another spanner in the works. In 2020, many years later, after Roy had returned from Australia and he was back in South Africa, you were phoned by a local radio station. What did they tell you?
They said to me that Roy Allen has approached them and he wants to do a polygraph test, and he asked them to contact me because he wanted me to be present. And if I had any questions, I could ask him while he's on the polygraph. I absolutely denied and said, no, I'm not going. Because at that time, in 2022, I saw Roy very different from when we saw him the first time. I couldn't believe a word that came out of his mouth. His arrogance. I mean, his email was RAUTEM. I mean, the murders in quite a lot of places were known as the RAUTEM murders, not just the Smit murders, but the RAUTEM. So to me, that was arrogant to use that in your own personal email. It was actually like saying, wow, you can't do anything to me. And
he was very arrogant. I found him also to be very arrogant. I found he was overconfident. He thought he was protected. And he probably, if he'd been involved, we don't know. If he'd been involved, he could have, he would have known that there's nothing they can do to him. But the thing is, he was also a bit of a loose cannon. You know, the matches, the red spray paint. It's like telling people it's you. And
I just couldn't.
It's arrogance. To me, it's arrogance.
I just couldn't handle him towards the end, you know, the later years, because
and he spoke a lot, eh?
Yeah, he was always trying to get in the newspaper with a story, and to explain that he had nothing to do with this, and that started irritating me.
But
Why
now-
was he so desperately trying?
To say it wasn't him.
Yeah.
But then he passed his polygraph. The polygraph, they specifically asked him whether he'd committed these murders or whether he had any involvement. And he said no, and he passed his polygraph. That's the one thing. But in any case, he died in 2023 after a long illness. He had cancer and he died. And he'd taken all his secrets to the grave. And that's the end of episode 2. In the next episode, episode 3, we'll still be looking at some of the perpetrators, the possible motive, and the possibility of who could have given these orders and instructions for these murders. I'll still be talking to Lisa Smit. And if you liked what you heard today and you found it interesting, please show me and let me know. Click on the like button. And if you don't want to miss the next episode, please subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.